Also, are they supposed to hand in their evaluations?
And give them problems to solve. Stephen Glenn, who's a person that we followed way back when and just was one of the wonderful people that guided our program, said if you're still making your child's lunch and he's over the age of 7, you're telling him he's not capable. Now, I won't ask you to raise your hand if you made your son's lunch before he was 7, but you're telling him he's not capable. Because a 7-year-old should be able to learn how to take 2 pieces of bread, put a piece of bologna on it, put a little mustard on it, put a top on it, and get it into his lunch bag. Now, some parent will always say, I could let my kid make his own lunch, but all he'd do is pack cookies. There's something called a time for learning, where we teach our children what goes in that lunch box. If you're still telling your kids, put on a coat, you're cold, and he's 10 years old, what are you telling him? He can't make that decision. And then one woman said, well, my kid's 10 and he can't make that decision. And I said, it's your child not as smart as mine, or hers. I would guess that your child is just as smart, but perhaps has not had the opportunity to learn from that consequence of being cold. Now, again, those are all gray areas. I'm not suggesting you throw a 2-year-old out into a snow field, unless they want to. By the way, there's a hot tub sitting over here on the side. That might help. But it means asking yourself reasonable questions. What is going to be the consequence of that behavior? Does that child need to learn from that mistake? Will that be helpful for him so that when he has larger mistakes, makes larger mistakes in his life, he has the tools to use to getting through that? If we take too much responsibility, they don't learn that. Every 3rd grade teacher will tell you what the child responds with when they've forgotten their library book. My mother forgot to pack it. So Johnny calls, and I don't think they do this anymore, but in the old days, Johnny used to call and say, Mom, I forgot my library book. Will you bring it to school? I can't go to library hour. I know you're going to miss going to library hour. When you come home, we'll talk about things you can do so you can remember to pack it for next week. That is not cruel. Now, when your mother calls you and said, Johnny told me you wouldn't take his library book to school, or his lunch, or his band equipment, that's your mother's issue. You are trying to raise and incorporate activity in your children's life that are going to build on these characteristics. I truly believe, when I was listening to the speakers this morning, that's a part of that being able to say no in a very respectful way. It's part of being able to play and not have consequences that are punitive in nature, but consequences that teach a lesson. Does this make sense? I think this is what we've lost. And I think one of the reasons we've lost it is because we're being measured all the time by our friends, by our school systems. My daughter told my grandson when he was about 6, because he didn't like to take a coat to school, in October, I don't know if you know this, but in October, it doesn't matter what the temperature is, they have to wear a coat out for a recess. It can be 60, 70, they still have to wear a coat because it's October. And Sam would never do that. So he's still very hot. He still just wears T-shirts and that. And my daughter would get a phone call. She would get a note, Sam didn't bring his coat, basically, in invisible ink that said, you're a bad mother, that kind of thing. And she finally said to Sam, would you take a coat so you can keep me out of trouble? But to be able to say, this is what I'm doing and this is the reason I'm doing it, and feel confident in it. That's what I was talking about this morning when I was talking about CPR. If you know CPR, you're confident about helping somebody. If you know what to do if somebody's bleeding, if you know those first things, then you're confident about doing it. If you know what you're doing as a parent has a purpose at the end, then you're confident about doing it. So we're going to go on with our presentation. What I want to do is play a short clip of a video.